Do you feel like your spirit is running on empty? Are you just going through the motions of superficial spirituality? As we develop patterns in our life, especially rhythms of staying busy in the church, it becomes easy for us to give the appearance of spiritual activity without experiencing spiritual vitality. Through this video series, I'd like to invite you to re-examine how you're doing with the fundamentals of the everyday Christian life by exploring several of the essential spiritual disciplines. But before we do so, let's make sure we're clear on our terminology. For starters, what is a disciple? A disciple is a follower, a learner, a student who does what they've been taught. In Jesus' day, a rabbi or a teacher was literally followed around by his disciples who watched his life and teaching and sought to emulate him. Today, a disciple of Jesus is someone who walks after Jesus and obeys what he taught, someone who follows Jesus. Your journey as a disciple and follower of Jesus begins when you repent of your sin and respond to his offer of salvation through faith. And then it continues throughout your life on this earth as you follow him. And this journey doesn't end until you die or Jesus returns. This is why I appreciate Eugene Peterson's simple description of discipleship as a long obedience in the same direction. To be a disciple of Jesus is to obey him with your entire life. So what is discipleship? Discipleship is not a church program or even a series of classes. It's not a checklist to complete or even a destination to reach. Instead, it's a lifelong direction, following after Jesus. The term discipleship describes the ongoing life of the believer. So discipleship is basically the state of being a disciple, being someone who follows Jesus. And the goal of discipleship is not simply knowledge, but obedience. A changed life that looks more and more like Jesus. What is a discipline? In general, a discipline is a field of study or a course of learning and training. It can also be a rule or system of rules governing conduct or activity. Discipline describes training that corrects, molds, or perfects the mental faculties or moral character. And notice that each of these definitions of a discipline requires submission and self-control. Just think about some of the disciplines you've committed to in your own life. For many, that may be personal health and fitness, maybe school and pursuing an education or a particular career or vocation, learning to sing or play a musical instrument, pursuing a sport, whether as an athlete or even as a fan, even consuming and mastering a book, television, or movie series. So why do you work hard and persevere in these areas? Because discipline is the path to freedom. You see, discipline leads to mastery, and mastery leads to freedom. No matter the difficulty, as you exercise self-control and submit yourself to the disciplined work of mastering a particular field or task, you remove the limits on what you can know or can perform. You then have the freedom to play any musical piece, or make any shot, or answer any question. Which leads to our next question. What is a spiritual discipline? Spiritual disciplines are practices that shape character, things you do to change who you are. Throughout church history, the fundamental means for knowing and following Jesus has been the spiritual disciplines, those biblically prescribed activities that mark the spiritual life of a disciple and enable you to grow closer to Jesus and show your devotion to him. In 1 Timothy chapter 4, verses 7 through 8, Paul writes to Timothy, "Train yourself in godliness, for the training of the body has limited benefit, but godliness is beneficial in every way, since it holds promise for the present life and also for the life to come." The term train here can also be translated as discipline. In this context, discipline means to exercise or train, to work out and struggle and grow. So as followers of Jesus, we're each called to increase in godliness through disciplined effort. 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 5 through 7. "For this very reason, make every effort to supplement your faith with goodness, goodness with knowledge, knowledge with self-control, self-control with endurance, endurance with godliness, godliness with brotherly affection, and brotherly affection with love." Notice the connection between knowledge, self-control, endurance, and godliness. Godliness comes through the continual growth in knowledge, self-control, and endurance. In other words, godliness comes through discipline. And as Don Whitney has rightly noted, discipline requires a direction. Otherwise, it becomes a drudgery. If you can see the glory of the goal, then all of the work becomes worthwhile. Romans 8:28 and 29. We know that all things work together for the good of those who love God, who are called according to His purpose. For those He foreknew, He also predestined to be conformed to the image of His Son. As followers of Jesus, we're destined to be like Jesus. We're called to live lives of holiness, godliness, and Christ-likeness, increasing in closeness and conformity to Jesus. This is our goal and the direction for our lives, what we're striving for. If you can keep your eyes on this goal, becoming more like Jesus, then this will provide both a direction and a motivation for your practice of the spiritual disciplines. But remember, becoming Christ-like is a process, not an event, and it takes a lifetime of devotion and discipline. Before we end this video, I have to ask you, what do you think is the biggest obstacle to regularly practicing spiritual disciplines? Depending on whose statistics you believe, Americans spend anywhere from 3 to 6 hours each day just watching videos, whether on a TV, tablet, phone, or other device. And that's not counting other leisure activities like socializing, playing video games or sports, exercising, or reading. For comparison, the average audio Bible is about 75 hours long. That means that in the time they spend watching videos and TV shows during a 2 to 3 week period, the typical American could have read or listened to the entire Bible. Something too many Christians have never done in their entire lives. We may say that we love the Lord and love His Word, but our actions prove otherwise. 1 John 3:18, little children, let us not love in word or speech, but in action and in truth. If you can fix your motive, if you can develop an unquenchable desire to know and love Jesus more, to trust Him fully, and to follow Him more faithfully, then you'll figure out how to make time for those practices that will draw you closer to Him and make you more like Him. And even though you may struggle, as you regularly practice these disciplines, you'll form habits. These habits, once established, will in turn shape your will and your heart. Once again, spiritual disciplines are practices that shape your character. Things you do that change who you are. And your goal is not simply behavior modification, but heart transformation. This isn't about being a better Christian or earning God's favor, but properly responding to God's grace. It's not a scorecard, but a love language. It's not simply a to-do list, but an integrated series of activities through which you come to know God more deeply and show your love for Him.